At Taurus Marketing, CEO Sharon Williams takes pride in the clients she's worked with who have become friends and who she has helped play a part in their future. It is, she believes, a measure of her success. One of those clients is David Gibbons, who heads internal comms for Comexposium. Welcome, Sharon and David.
Thank you very much.
Well, Sharon, over the years, you've worked with many clients who have achieved incredible careers. David is one of those clients. It must be a huge source of pride.
Yes, it absolutely is, Jacinta, and it's wonderful that after 16, 70 years, we're sitting here together, just returned from China, and we're looking at our next venture together, aren't we?
And David, tell us where you first met Sharon and started working with Taurus, where you were at the time.
We gave her a very hard task to do because the project was called Jesus All About Life. And it was an idea where the churches of Sydney, underneath the Bible Society, tried to get a message across that Jesus is as relevant in the year 2000 as what he was 2,000 years before. But you know what? Getting all the churches together and getting them to work together was a difficult task. And on top of that, we went to Sharon and Taurus 1 month before we were about to launch and say, help us, we need to get into the media, we need to do PR. What's all this new social media and everything else? We don't understand it, we don't know how it works, it's up to you. And she had to hit the ground with just 4 weeks notice, remember?
How did you go? What did you achieve together?
Well, it was amazing. And she was able to get the media, the regular media, to stop and listen to what the combined churches, particularly in Sydney, wanted to say about Jesus. Now, that's not an easy topic to talk about. And, your staff at the time, not all of them were Christians to start with. I think there were Hindus and people who didn't even have any particular faith background at all. And this was really the ideal way to actually work with a PR agency, because you were the target audience. If it didn't gel with you, it wasn't going to gel with anybody. And so we took your ideas on board. It was a very risky thing for conservative churches and church leaders alike to try and risk something like this with an advertising agency, a PR agency, but you delivered it. And I even remember the first day of the launch, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a huge sandstorm which took all the news and the headlines that hit Sydney. Do you remember that?
Big sandstorm.
So even the agencies, the supernatural agencies were working against this being successful. And yet today, Jacinta, you'd be interested to know that this has become a case study that is now studied at a number of universities here in Australia. So it really did catch attention and did work. And I guess the miracle, if I can use that word, was that it pulled leaders and churches together who would otherwise never ever have anything to do with each other. And that, I think, was probably the greatest miracle that came out of all of this.
Using that term miracle applicably here, Sharon, no doubt you remember these days. How did you make that happen?
So, Jacinta, it was when I think back, the CEO of the Bible Society, who was our who was our new client, rang us and said, "We've just fired the PR agency. That's never a good sign. We want you to take on this launch." And I said, "Look, I am a Christian. I'm a failed Christian. I really don't think I can do this. We don't do religious marketing." And he said, "No, you're the girl. You've got to do this." So I pulled them into a room, ran them through the bullseye methodology. I said, "Look, if we love each other at the end of it, we'll work together. If not, you won't have lost anything." And at the end of that session, we were all in love and we started work. It was actually about 3 weeks before the launch. And the first thing we did was to put all the different denominations. It was a Christian campaign, but I didn't realize that under the Christian umbrella, there were 15, 18 different denominations who were all competing. And we managed to get them in a room together, pull them together, get them working as one cohesive team, and it was the most extraordinary campaign. And it is taught in universities now. We did win awards for it. We had 25,000 on social media within a very short period of time for the first time ever. We had over, I think it was 400 pieces of coverage in 8 weeks. And my line is, if I can market a 2,000-year-old intangible that I can't front up to media interviews, then I can do anything.
And you proved it.
And we did it.
Yeah.
Highly political, highly, the most political campaign I've ever done.
So that was a few decades ago now. Can you believe it? David, tell us what you've been up to since then.
Well, Sharon and I, didn't stop there. I moved to China 11 years ago, and I asked Sharon to come over and talk to a group of Chinese people that I was working with. We had about 1,000 people there at my company RT with my Chinese partner there. And we ran a conference there, and I asked Sharon to come and talk to them about how they can connect with Western audiences using social media, using traditional media channels and the like. And in that audience, Jacinta, there were people who are now billionaires, not millionaires. Some of the wealthiest people in China were sitting in that room that day, and they were listening. And many of them, even just a year or so ago, one of them spoke to me. He was a young entrepreneur when he started his business 40 years ago. He was probably only about the age of 20 at the time, and he said, that lady with the blonde hair, she said things to me that I've been able to utilize in my business and be able to really become a worldwide organization. So it's been fascinating. And Sharon was successful, Jacinta, because she's not just an Australian. She's a Brit who's lived in Hong Kong and then come to Australia. So you have world experience, and people recognize who you are and what you have to offer. And it's that world experience that you bring that is so valuable. So it was so valuable to me personally, and I've really cherished the relationship we've had for 15 years as a result. Thank you.
Sharon, tell us some of the other projects you've worked on together over the years. Obviously that first one was a huge success.
Yes, so after David and I meeting with the Jesus All About Life campaign for the Bible Society, we then did some work together on the Seventh-day Adventist Church. David at that point was head of comms, and we actually, this is one of my proudest pieces of work, we actually wrote the 10-year future strategy for the global Seventh-day Adventist Church. And it took me a lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of love, and we presented that to global leaders. And that was a very exciting thing because we had a very clear pathway forward for a church that was thought of in certain ways. And we had a whole communications plan, didn't we, for bringing it forward and building its future. And then one of the highlights has got to be standing on that stage with 1,000 people in front of me speaking to a Chinese audience with an interpreter. There was 1,000 people in the room. That's a pretty big room, isn't it?
It was a big room.
David, you obviously remember that time as well.
Yes, I do. The Seventh-day Adventist Church, for example, hasn't always had the best of press. It's seen as a minority group, maybe not even Christian and all the rest of it. But we're able to position that through the Sydney Adventist Hospital, the health arm of the organisation, through the school system, the largest Protestant school system in the world, and start to reposition, some notable people in the media. Dr. James Wright, for example, is a very well-known doctor at the time, going back 20 years ago. And, he's a Seventh-day Adventist, and he was able to use his health experience to be able to talk to people. So by putting some of these iconic names and people onto the stage, it made people realize, Seventh-day Adventists are a regular group of people. They're my neighbours, they're real people, they're helpful people, they're kind people, they're loving people, they're Christian people in the mainstream as well. So, Sharon helped to position, the church at the time in that way, and that was extremely helpful at a very difficult assignment, I think, very difficult.
What are some of your favourite memories of working with Taurus over the years?
one of the things that I've really enjoyed, Sharon, is just working with your young team who are just so energetic, so full of new ideas, different ideas, challenging ideas. And yet there's so much sincerity in all of that. They're not just trying to be difficult. They're just asking the questions that the regular public would be asking to really engage and to encourage and to really help portray, the various different groups that I've been involved with that needed to be promoted. So that is very refreshing, very challenging, but very, very enjoyable at the same time.
What about you, Sharon? What are some of your highlights of working with David over all of these years?
Oh gosh, there's so many. Arriving in China to make that speech, pulling all those leaders of the Christian churches into a room and catching each other's eye across the room to go, we did it. Getting the Sydney Adventist Hospital onto social media for the very first time. I mean, we didn't just work with the Sydney Seventh-day Adventist brand. We worked with the hospitals, didn't we? With nutrition, there were just so many highlights. Probably our enthusiasm. We've just grasped everything, haven't we? And we've just done it.
That's it.
David, I know this is going to be hard, but if you could just pick a couple of things about Taurus that working with Sharon and Taurus that you continue to do in your everyday working life, what would they be?
The first thing that comes to my mind is the word integrity. I think, you've got to be true to yourself, and Sharon, you've always pushed that. And I think that's one of the takeaways that I've had, is that be true to yourself, be exactly who you are, be a person of integrity, be a company of integrity, and share that. I think that's a very valuable takeaway, one of the most important ones that I've had to work with. I think another one comes to mind is perseverance. Push through. Don't just give up when the going gets tough, because there's been a lot of times when it would have been easy just to give up and say it's too hard. And maybe this is the Taurus bullish sort of, thinking, is that, you've got to continue to push through. You've got to persevere, because if it's really, really worth it, it's really worth persevering. And I think integrity, perseverance, and maybe consistency, being, continuing to be who you are, and consistency of message. Sometimes we think, oh, we'll put one message out here and a different message out there, and you always said to us, be consistent with your message, so because people may not have seen you the first time or the second time, or maybe they did, but it's the second or the third or the fourth time that they will get the message, and then it will gel and it will click. So be consistent. So I guess those are the qualities that I've picked up from you, Sharon. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. David, what's next for you?
Well, 11 years in China, I've come back, and, I wouldn't swap those years for anything. I've been working with young people. I've had an amazing career. I was a school principal for 15 years, and then I ran my own business because I'd been in a classroom all my life till that stage, and then got into broadcasting and publishing and working with the church, and then went to China, where I was mentoring young people, and I think all the things were coming together, teaching and communicating and that sort of thing. So working with young people for the last 11 years, helping them to work with and connect and communicate with people in Western countries. So it's been an exciting journey. So what's next? It's got to be more of the same, an ability and an opportunity to mentor and train and use broadcasting and communication skills and publishing and all the rest of it. That's my passion and that's my love. And I'm looking forward to whatever comes next.
Great. We'll look forward to seeing what that is. Thank you so much, David. Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you.